I've already started Vlogmas and I didn't realise. Hello everybody, welcome back to the channel. Today's book for Vlogmas is The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe from the Complete Chronicles of Narnia. I know this is available on BorrowBox to read. I have seen this version on there and I believe it's on Amazon as well. This is the big book that I have been reading the Chronicles of Narnia out of. It's illustrated in colour by Pauline Baines. Beautiful, beautiful book. I love the fact that as you can go through, you've just got such beautiful images going all the way through it. I have to Google how many pages it is because in here, because you've got like 4 pages across 2. I want to say it's not actually that long, maybe 200 and something pages. I'll first get in with the blurb for you, if it's on here. 4 adventurous siblings, Peter, Susan, Edmund and Lucy Penversey, step through a wardrobe door and into the land of Narnia, a land frozen in eternal winter and enslaved by the power of the White Witch. But when almost all hope is lost, the return of the great lion Aslan signals a great change and a great sacrifice. So I believe this was actually the first book written by C.S. Lewis, but it's the second book when you put them all in order. If there is anybody out there who hasn't read The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe, it is such a great book. It is so great, and I love that just everything about, like, when you do see adaptations of it, nothing is left out. As I was reading it, I was remembering the production at Lee's Playhouse, which I believe is now going to the West End. I believe it is the same version that is going into the Gillian Lynn Theatre in London, where Cinderella has been. Well, Andrew Lloyd Webber Cinderella. And at Lee's Playhouse, it was in the Round, and I saw it a million times. I saw it a lot of times. It was my first ever show that I worked at the Playhouse, and it was stunning. It was visually stunning, and the auditorium, their main auditorium, which is the Quarry Theatre, was transformed into the Round. The seating is already on a bit of a curve with the stage. It's not like a traditional proscenium arch. Basically, the front row is on level with the stage. They can raise it, but generally it's all on the same level. And so for this production, they used the full stage, because the stage at the Playhouse is huge. It's absolutely massive, and you don't realise that unless they're like doing productions that make full use of it. Like in Macbeth, they made full use of the whole of the stage, and it was, we see like the vast space of it. But yeah, they used that space to turn it into the Round, so they had seating on the other side. People came in from what is essentially backstage, and it was stunning. And as I was reading the book, I was imagining the play in my mind. It was essentially a play with music. I wouldn't call it a musical, but it was a play with music, and I just love the diversity of that cast and how wonderful it was, and the fact that the White Witch, Jadis, was played by an actress who was like completely my childhood. I got to meet her backstage and she was absolutely lovely. Carla Mendoza, she was my childhood because I was obsessed with My Parents Are Aliens when I was little. But yeah, she played the White Witch in the Lee's Playhouse version of The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe, and she was brilliant. She was fantastic. I loved her so much. And she was such a lovely person. She always had her dog with her backstage, so we'd always see her little doggy in the green room. It was so cute. For somebody who's not really a dog person, I became obsessed with her dog. But yeah, I'm not talking about the play, I'm talking about the book. So at the beginning of the book, you meet the children, the 2 boys and the 2 girls, and they are being evacuated to the countryside during the war, and they end up in this house of a professor. From the first book, you then find out that it's actually the young boy from The Magician's Nephew. The nephew in question has grown up into this crazy professor from part of a tree that was brought back from Narnia in its creation. The tree that was put in the back garden was struck by lightning. He decided to take it apart and he built a wardrobe out of it, and that wardrobe goes into the Grand House. I feel like I've kind of messed up describing what happened there. But yes, so that is essentially how the portal to Narnia happened with the wardrobe. All comes back to the Magician's Nephew. So the portal happens because it came from a tree that was originally came from Narnia, and so it created a portal in the back of the wardrobe that only people could find. when they're not really looking for it. Lucy is the first one that goes into the wardrobe, and you see her meet Mr. Tumnus, who is a faun, and she finds out about how Narnia is completely covered in snow. It's an eternal winter, but it's never Christmas, and that the White Witch is the cause of it. The faun, Mr. Tumnus, admits that he's been a bit of a bad boy. He was planning on kidnapping Lucy to take her to the White Witch, but he's gotten to know her and he wants to let her go home, so he walks her back to the lamppost, which was brought into Narnia by the White Witch herself when she visited London in the first book, where she accidentally brought a part of a lamppost back with her, and it implanted into the ground and became a brand new lamppost in Narnia. So it's like the only thing for our world in Narnia, well, apart from the Queen and King, who were a taxi driver and his wife in the first book, who then became King and Queen of Narnia, and we don't actually know what happened to them. Maybe it will come later what happened to them. But yeah, when you see the relationship between the kids, and you see Edmund kind of becoming a bit of a rebellious one, because at first when Lucy goes into the wardrobe and comes back, they don't believe that she has found this place in a wardrobe. They think she's lying, they think she's playing. The professor says, well, do you have any reason to believe she's lying? Is she known for lying? They're just like, no, she's a truthful person. They're just like, then why do you think she's lying? Just because it can't be true. And the professor's there going, really? You told me that she doesn't lie, so is it possible she is telling the truth? And that she has found this place? I love that the professor is just in that place of just saying, if she's never telling the truth, it's likely she is. And then you've also got the hindsight from book 1 of telling you that the professor's been to Narnia before. He didn't really know what it was at the time, but he has been to Narnia as a child, and so it's not completely outside the realm of possibility. There's also the fact that when they're in Narnia, it's like no time passes in the real world, and again, the professor comes back and says, if she really has found another world in the back of my wardrobe, isn't it extremely possible that they have different timelines, they have different rates of time to each other? It's perfectly plausible. He really has kind of leaned into that mad professor type. Yes, and seeing just the relationship with the kids, seeing how Edmund goes into that rebellious thing when he goes into the wardrobe and he meets the witch, and how easy it is for him to be manipulated, and he's just there going, it's not a case of he wanted to be manipulated, it's just that you've got somebody who's very good at manipulating, and just seeing the kids evolve, because you are essentially watching them grow up in Narnia, even though no time is passing in the Earth world. When they go into this alternate universe with Narnia, you do watch them grow up, and so it's like a coming of age story, watching them all grow up and watching them learn from their mistakes, and seeing these sibling relationships and rivalries, and seeing how they are with each other and with the friends they meet along the way, in regards to Mr. Tumnus and the Beavers, and then Aslan, and the girls' relationship with Aslan is really, really sweet. And I admit, Lionel the Witch in the Wardrobe gets really dark. I find it interesting that that these books were originally written for C.S. Lewis's, I think it was his goddaughter. Was it his goddaughter or his niece? It does say in the beginning, so I'm sure there's a dedication. Minch's nephew is dedicated to the Kilmer family. Yeah, it was his goddaughter. The dedication at the beginning of this one says, to Lucy Barfield. My dear Lucy, I wrote this story for you, but when I began it, I had not realised that girls grow quicker than books. As a result, you are already too old for fairy tales, and by the time it is printed and bound, you will be older still. But someday you will be old enough to start reading fairy tales again. You can then take it down from some upper shelf, dust it, and tell me what you think of it. I shall probably be too deaf to hear and too old to understand a word you say, but I shall still be your affectionate godfather, C.S. Lewis. Wouldn't that be so amazing to have such a famous book and series dedicated to you by your godfather who wrote it? That must be an incredible thing. That is where the dedication is in this book. And I believe it is this version, this illustrated version that is on BorrowBox and available on Kindle as well. I am so glad I finally started reading these stories. It really does just read like somebody just telling a story. There are references to the idea of somebody telling this story to somebody else. Like, I could tell you about this, and it really does just read as a fairy tale. And that's what's so lovely about it. It reads as if like you reading it to somebody else, or somebody else reading it to you. And it's quite magical to read it like that, because you don't often get books like that. As somebody who has not read the complete chronicles, which is why I'm reading it now. As I said before, the only time I read The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe, I believe, was when I was at school, and I watched the BBC adaptation of it from like the 90s. Was it the 80s or the 90s? I don't know where it all goes, and I don't know if there's any reference to the person who is telling the stories later on, because it feels like it could be. But I'm sure I'll look back on this once I get to the end and go, Debs, you're very far off, or Debs, you don't know what's coming. But yeah, The Complete Chronicles of Narnia by C.S. Lewis, The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe. It's just wonderful. It's just wonderful, and it does have the darkness, and there are stories where kids can grow up with the stories. That's what I'd say about it. But yeah, ultimately it feels like coming of age within the story, because you do see the siblings grow up in Narnia. You see their relationships grow. And yeah, it's just wonderful, it's beautiful, it's magical. It's The Complete Chronicles of Narnia by C.S. Lewis. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe if you're not already, and I will see you tomorrow with another video.